Hello, today is Friday, January 16th, and welcome to episode 546 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Senior Fellow Jessica Jones, and I'm joined today by Advisory Board member Les Munson and two Senior Fellows, Andrew Boreen and Joshua Huminski. Thanks, guys, for getting on the horn. Okay, I've somehow become the recurring host of Fun Fridays, but this Friday we're actually making it fun because we're not just taking a normal story and then trying to get Les's zany takes on it. We actually have a non-headliner. So CFR posted a list of the 10 best and 10 worst foreign policy decisions in U.S. history. They polled the Society for Historians of American Foreign Relations to put together the list. So we shared the list with the team, and for listeners and YouTube watchers, we'll put the link to that list in our description so you can check it out yourself. But basically, it covers 250 years of American history, right? Some controversial picks, some expected picks. I'm not going to run through all 20 right here, but some highlights on the best side. We've, of course, got of course, I'll put that in air quotes, the creation of NATO, the UN, the Louisiana Purchase. We've got the handling of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And then on the worst side, the invasion of Iraq, the deployment of combat forces in Vietnam. And I don't know, Andrew, maybe the U.S.-backed coup in Iran in 1953. I don't know, maybe food for fodder later. We'll think about it.
Yeah, I may have some
takes?
feedback on that one. Yeah, I got a hot take.
And so how he defines, best and worst is left to the crew here. Some of these, can be seen as successful in the immediate aftermath, then become a little more controversial later on, or vice versa. So team, I'm going to start with the best foreign policy decisions. It's been a long week here at NSI, so I want some good news, okay? So Joshua, I'm going to turn first to you because you've got your own podcast, so you know how this works. What do you think, from that list or off list, best U.S. foreign policy decision?
So I'm gonna go off list on this one. I think the list is quite good, but I'm gonna go off list. It is less of a decision point and more of a process, but giving a great deal of credit to George H.W. Bush and his team for successfully navigating the collapse of the Soviet Union, the end of the Cold War, the reunification of Germany, which is a underappreciated pivot point in European history, but also American history, for bringing that war and that conflict to a close so successfully in a point in time when it could have gone very badly. The return of Soviet forces from Eastern Europe, reunification of Germany. I mean, it was a masterful stroke of almost Metternickian diplomacy and return to a pre-war situation in the state that should have been on a list, but it wasn't.
I'd love to say Joshua just broke both barriers, off list and not a decision. Thanks for sticking to the rules of the show, Joshua. I love it.
By the way,
it's the benefits of having your own podcast.
And use of the word Metternickian.
Les, I don't know if you're going to be able to compete with that, so I'm going to go to you last. Think about how you might compete with Joshua's response. Andrew, I feel like you're also going to go off script, but what do you have for us?
Well, I'm going to start off with what I think are really the biggest and best two. And the first one, honestly, is the Bretton Woods system. It,
on list.
This is on list, but it's off list because it's frequently forgotten how important economic power is and just what it meant when the United States became the anchor currency for all other currencies. And the establishment of Bretton Woods put the United States dollar in the driver's seat for tracking foreign money flows. Things that we use today, like the SWIFT system, things that are kind of getting attacked by things like cryptocurrency and other ways of transferring wealth outside of the Bank Secrecy Act, which is like misnamed because it's actually the Bank Transparency Act because you have to report suspicious activity.
Secrecy sounds cooler.
Yeah, but I do. I think at the end of the day, economic security is national security. And a lot of times those of us in the national security space or military affairs or looking at foreign policy, we forget how important it is and just how transparent that made global capital flows to the United States with some kind of edge with its other allies. So I think that's a little bit, I would put that actually number one is Bretton Woods and that success. Then I am going to go a little off script. I actually think Operation Ajax might be up for debate. The blob loves picking on CIA. The blob loves picking on covert action. And frankly, the blob and the American public never really understand behind the curtain how covert action works, how it's authorized, how it's overseen. And so I'm going to say that overthrowing the Shah did create a more friendly alliance in terms with Iran for about 26 years. And it wasn't until 1979. And who could say, hey, overthrowing the Shah will lead to radical Shiite Islamic theocracy? And 26 years later. So I just think that one frequently gets used as like a shibboleth of, ill will, evil America. But let's remember that was FDR's son, Kermit, that led that operation. Very much an operational and tactical success. And I think you could look at a lot of leaders over the 26 years before the mullahs took over and the Ayatollah. So I think I would put Ajax and the overthrow of the Shah is potentially not on any of these lists, but up for debate.
Okay, Les, how are you competing? Well, what do you got for us this Friday?
Well, first of all, I think kudos to Andrew for
Are you part of the blob? Did he just insult you?
Aren't we all part of the blob?
We're all part of the blob. Gotta own it.
Even the anti-blob is part of the blob.
That's right.
You can't have one without the other. Andrew, very gutsy call, because no one is going to agree with you on the Iran thing. So good for you. Courageous. I'm going to go with a couple of things that for some reason are not on the great moves list, on the best foreign policy moves. One is Ronald Reagan winning the Cold War by having a comprehensive policy of pushing back against communism, against the evil empire, using proxy forces where necessary, calling for the Star Wars program to ratchet up the arms race on the nuclear side. All of those things added up to a much quicker collapse of Soviet communism than otherwise would have happened. And that gets very political because one of our major political parties wasn't real thrilled about that, but they were wrong. And it worked, and kudos to Ronald Reagan. Second thing I'm going to flag, which I don't understand its absence on the list, is George W. Bush's PEPFAR program, which was a massive global health, still is a massive global health program that the U.S. government runs, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa. It saved an entire generation of Africans from the scourge of HIV/AIDS, which was a global pandemic that was wiping out millions of people. And without PEPFAR and without the initiative of the Bush administration, tens of millions of more people would have died. So really an amazing foreign assistance program that we've kind of lost the string on lately because this has become very fraught. These are very fraught issues, but that was an amazing example of U.S. leadership in the world.
Okay, since I was busy last night, I stuck to the homework and I went on list only. So I went with the pretty obvious choice of the Marshall Plan. When I learned about it in high school, it seemed like this, do-gooder U.S., helping out Europe after the war, providing stability, making sure people didn't go hungry. But then you learn about it a little later. It wasn't all altruism, right? You had rebuilding Europe to basically buy American. American had came out of the war with huge industrial capacity, and we needed buyers of our goods. So, in fact, our economy was powered by the rebuild of Europe and their ability to buy American. So, great job to the Marshall Plan. Okay, now I know we're never going to end on a low note. So, even when we say the worst foreign policy decisions, I know you guys are going to make it fun. So, Joshua, we'll go in the same order. On list or off list? What's the decision you want to critique here?
You're not going to like it, but I'm going to go off list again, and it's actually the inverse.
I thought you were going to say Marshall Plan. I was like, don't do that to me. Don't.
No, I'm going to go off list because it's going to be a parallel to what I thought was one of the best decisions, which is successfully managing the end of the Cold War, the reunification of Germany. While the United States did not explicitly say that the NATO expansion would not continue eastward towards the Russian frontier, the United States did not disabuse Russia of the notion that was part of the agreement. And I think that set up some pretty significant friction points that we're still dealing with today, that had that been made clearer either one way or the other, it could have potentially removed a friction point. There are plenty of friction points between the United States and Moscow. But I think that leaving that sufficiently vague allowed interpretation on both sides for kind of what they wanted to hear at a particularly challenging time. And I think that should have been addressed more clearly at the time. And we might have been able to avoid some issues down the pipe.
Some issues down the pipe?
Some, not all.
Andrew, what do you think?
So I'm just going to mention a common trend in the worst decisions. And there's a common trend in that they don't involve thinking through the importance of hard power when trying to exert soft power, right? Or if you're going to use the third option, mentioned Ajax and covert action, kind of the intended hidden hand of American foreign policy. So, I'm going to say I think that the common thread is not thinking through when using hard power, looking at it as a hard power only answer, right? That having participated in the invasion of Iraq in 2003, I don't think we gave a whole lot of thought to how to stabilize the country after what really was a flawless invasion operation and decapitation of Saddam Hussein's regime. So I think that things like de-Baathification weren't thought through with its impact on hard power and the ability to maybe look at a counterinsurgency down the road. I think other trends, looking at only soft power. Les mentioned the JCPOA, right? And that was solely focused on soft power at the omission of the importance of putting pressure on the Iranian regime and its proxies as they were expanding really nefarious deeds over a 10-year plus period. So I think I would say that the common thread is the thing that I'm most interested in, and it's when decision makers are not looking at all the tools in the kit and using them, to advance the foreign policy objective.
You might have just magic 8-balled Les's response when it comes to JCPOA, because I've heard those words a lot from Les. Les, give us some insight into what do you think are the worst decision?
I'm for worst foreign policy initiatives by the U.S. government in the last what was the
250
years? 250 years.
250.
Right. I don't know if it's in the top 10, but it's pretty close, or it ought to be, which is exactly what Andrew said, the Joint Combined Plan of Action, which was the official name of the Iranian nuclear deal that the Obama administration negotiated in 2015. It was a terrible deal for the United States. We ended up giving Iran a ton of money for very marginal limits on a nuclear weapons program that, frankly, they don't really want to pursue anyway, and gave them license to pursue all kinds of chaotic policies in the Middle East, funding proxy forces like Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, that caused all kinds of trouble for a decade until Israel, after the terrible events of October 7th, 2023, decided to take action and fight back against what Iran was doing, and really finally neutered the regime of the Ayatollahs that, thank you, Kermit Roosevelt, for setting up so very long ago, Andrew. In any event, all right, I'm kind of kidding on that. It's not really his fault. But this nuclear deal by the Obama administration gets almost universal praise from the blob. The blob is wrong. It was not a good deal. We should not have fallen for that trap. It was exactly what the Iranians wanted, and it was not in our interest to pursue it.
Okay, I'll do really quickly because I also stayed on list. I did this. The U.S. rejecting the Treaty of Versailles after World War I, before the start of World War II, of course. I don't know how many books have been written on the causes of World War II, that transition period. There's no straight lines, but obviously that was a major factor, the U.S. disengagement from Europe, the instability throughout the continent that raged afterwards. So speaking of trend lines, Andrew, just U.S. disengagement, right? And the implications of that. Okay, folks, we've run through the best and worst. Any closing words to the blob as we move forward and make new foreign policy decisions?
Be open-minded to positive developments this year.
Wow.
I like that. I want to tip a hat to the U.S. Agency for International Development. In my opinion, it should have been on the list as one of the best decisions to have created it in the first place. It created defense, diplomacy, and development. So it's kind of like, how do you make miniature Marshall plans to help win over hearts and minds, grow the economy back to Bretton Woods? And when we all do better, we all do better. And I personally lament the loss of USAID, and I hope that some form of development aid comes into the mix for foreign policy in the future.
I feel like this is almost our January 1st episode. It's like well wishes for the year. I like Les ending us on a positive. We're gonna have a great year, guys. Let's all power forward. That's a wrap. Thanks to Kelly Crowley, Claude Jennings, and the NSI team for their help in producing today's episode. We're gonna be out on Monday. It's Martin Luther King Jr. Monday. So join us on Wednesday, January 21st for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. And who knows what might happen by Wednesday, guys. That's like 5 days away from now. So stay tuned. We're on YouTube. Check out our channel there for video of today's episode. And if you like what you heard or saw, which I'm sure you did, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.